Ever wish you could simplify your workflows and get a little help with identifying, prioritizing, and remediating security issues in your environment? Figure out how on today's Tanium Tech Talks. Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I am Alex Miller, and with me today, as always, is my wonderful co-host, Jesh Sachs.
Thank you so much, Alex. And for our viewers, hopefully you've heard of exposure management. Exposure management is a proactive cybersecurity discipline that continually identifies, assesses, prioritizes, and then remediates security risks across an organization's entire digital attack surface. With us today to talk about this idea is a longtime Tanium favorite, Greg. Greg, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what we're going to be talking about today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Greg Lacroix. I'm a domain architect, and I'm excited to be here with you and to discuss today about exposure management. So what we will do today is talk about the difference between vulnerability management and what it used to be, and specifically focus on exposure management and the difference we have between both. And we will dig inside some details about what it's actually covering.
You know, Greg, as we've been talking about this, even just preparing for this, finding out that difference between vulnerability to exposure management to me is about this. Vulnerability feels so narrow, and exposure management feels like so much more expansive. We're actually seeing, prioritizing, taking in everything within the state and getting that real-time good endpoint data. So I'm excited to hear more about this and how Tanium kind of plays into this new idea. So let's jump in. Can you outline for our viewers kind of that difference? What's vulnerability management and why we're making this shift to exposure management?
Absolutely. So the vulnerability management is basically a continuous risk-based process, and it's aimed to identify, assess, prioritize, and remediate security weakness inside the IT system, application, or networks. In the opposite, exposure management is a continuous threat-informed process, and it's aimed to identifying, correlating, and reducing all forms of security exposure across the entire environment. It's not only focusing on CVEs, but it's also looking, to expand the scope to include like misconfigurations, identify the risk in general, like, the expired certificate or compliance deviations, for example.
Greg, so it's more of a holistic view, right? We're not just talking about CVEs. We're not talking about we're safe as long as we adhere to Patch Tuesday, right? We're taking
Mhm.
all these different vectors that are required to be safe with cybersecurity and putting them together in a workflow. That way we know we are as safe as we possibly can be.
Absolutely. And the goal, so it's really to review the life cycle about how we are managing this exposure. So it is now, separate in 5 different steps. So the first one will be the scoping. It's basically identifies what we need to protect. The second one is the pure discovery part where we identify where actually the exposure exists. Third one will be the prioritizations. This is basically when do we act? When do we decide to apply some remediations? Then we have the validation step. This is actually verifying, is it exploitable? Do we have, the needs to fix it right now? And finally, the mobilizations. It's basically who will fix these vulnerabilities, who will fix this exposure, and also how we will fix it, because there is different approach to fix, this risk.
Mm. As you're speaking about each of those different phases, I'm just thinking we could sit here all day talking about like practically how do we make that scoping work? How do we, for each step, there's so much that we do. Unfortunately, we're limited to to one tech talk to go through this. So I know there's some good stuff in the Tanium platform that supports this whole workflow. If for our customers and users who are watching, walk me through where would you start if you are trying to kind of implement these exposure management workflows within your Tanium environment?
Absolutely. So let's jump inside the demo. And to start, I usually like to go directly inside the benchmark part. Benchmark basically will provide an immediate and objective snapshot of the organization's current security posture. We have the enterprise risk, where we can get some information about the compliance failure, the vulnerabilities, the certificates, and also the lateral movement. From there, I like to go inside the dashboard and start, with this approach to get just an overview about everything that can be part, of the scoping and discovery step. First, a clear inventory of our environment. Which endpoints are running? What do we have in terms of operating systems and in terms of version of operating system? So we have first this clear approach. The second one will be focusing on the vulnerabilities. We have an overview about the known exploit vulnerability dashboard that is providing additional information that will be helpful to prioritize the remediations. We know basically which one is a high priority and already exploited. We have some specific filtering by product, by vendors, and also some additional information about end-of-life product that we have running in our environment. As a next step, we also have a different view about the different vulnerabilities we get in the environment. It's filtered by operating system. We have some details on the workstations, the servers, and also some critical applications or popular applications we have running in our environment, such as the browser, Adobe Reader, Java, or Office, which are really commands to be considered as vulnerables. From there, I like to navigate in the risk score approach. The risk score is very interesting because it's helped to separate, these different metrics and, having some contribution, some percentage associated with them to know basically which one is like critical or needs to be fixed first. We have, the 6 metrics associated here, which goes from compliance failure, different vulnerability types, critical and high, information about certificate, and TLS and secure, and also the lateral movement.
Hey, Greg. So this, I briefly mentioned like a holistic view of your security posture, and this is kind of breaking it down really easy for users of the Tanium console to see all the different things we're looking at in order to decide how secure we can be in our environment, right?
Absolutely. So having this approach from a single console, from a single point of view, you can, get multiple entries and help, to prioritize without having to jump in different tools. So it's very important and interesting, to centralize this information in a single point of view.
Right. And I love just how much data is here. I know we skimmed through it. We talked about it in 2 minutes, but goodness, we could spend an entire episode diving into some of these dashboards. So I would highly encourage you, if you've got Benchmark, to dig in and see it, because it's those first few phases of exposure management, right? That scoping, discovery, kind of some of the prioritization, that this is really, really helping us kind of wrap our heads around what's happening and where should I be focusing my attention, whether that's OS or other things going on.
Definitely, you need to get, an accurate visibility and, information about what's running in your environment if you would like to get a proper prioritizations and mobilization from your team behind. So as a first step, we will navigate inside the compliance failure. What is interesting in this view is we can get for specific rules, how many failure this was in place. Here, we will focus on the first one, and we will dig directly inside comply to get additional contextual information specifically about these rules.
All right. So what you just did there, I want to wrap my head around this. So we were in Benchmark. We were talking about all the different compliance failures. You picked one and started to drill in, and now we're in this whole workbench where we can see exactly more detail around what that rule is, what and why it's failed, where it's failed, all the good stuff, right?
Absolutely. And that's a good advantage from Benchmark because you can directly pivot from one view to another inside the Tanium platform. So here we will navigate inside the all findings. And one interesting information we have here is the endpoint criticality. So as part of your prioritization also, it's important to know the priority of your endpoint. If this is critical, like most of the information we have here, or high, or like normal information, depending, if that's a server, Active Directory server, or just like a temp, workstations or a laptop, used for test, you will not have the same priority, and the risk associated will not have the same criticality. So here we see that we have a lot of Windows Server 2019 with these deviants. First thing we will do, so open the flyout box and getting some additional details about why we were failing in this test. One information I like here is the remediation step. Remediation is really explaining why you failed and what you can do in the next step to fix these deviants. If we select the investigate portions, this one will also open an additional window and provide some details about why you were failing. The actual value is providing some information about what we see on the devices, and the expected state is providing what we expect to see as a result.
Everything you just did right there, I find absolutely lovely because coming into Tanium, I had never done this compliance vulnerability stuff before. And so wrapping my head around what is this? How do I fix it? What do I prioritize can be so hard. And I love this workflow because we've got that criticality right there that we can configure per environment. So we know, hey, this is like you were saying, this is important. I care more about a failed compliance check on a server running a business application than I do a workstation that is potentially, behind a lot of firewalls, doesn't have lots of access. So that part of it, prioritization, absolutely adore. And then the fact that you can see what the failure is exactly and that remediation, that makes it so easy. I love it.
Absolutely. And you can get it at scale, on all the environments. So it's good to get the visibility. It's good to know what's happened in your environment. It's even better if you can now fix it directly from the same product. So from there, we can navigate inside Enforce policy configurations. And one of the nice features we have as part of Enforce, it's also to import directly some files and some policy informations. We have, for example, two types of information I usually like to use. The first one is the bundle kit from CIS. That's the one we will use as part of this policy to remediate it. The second one is also provided by STIG, and it's some GPO that we have for every operating systems covered by STIGs, and that can, provide some suggestion of rules to apply. So here we will use the one for the server 2019s. We see that it's providing different policy that we can apply on the devices. What we will use here as part of the Microsoft level 1 for standard servers. When we import this policy, we have here a listing of the different policies and sub-policies that are included in these files. We see that we have some information about the machine administrative settings. We have some extra registry key that are also included. And what will be useful in our scenario is the security settings here. So let's create the policy. So now that we have created this policy, we have the 4 different sections: firewall management, machine administrative, security, and user administrative templates. Here we will focus specifically on the machine administrative templates, and we will apply a filter on the specific one, the specific test we were looking for. And we can see that we have this policy that is in place. From there, we can automatically create the policy, and if we want, directly enforce the device to fix these remediations. So next time the machine will be automatically scanned, as part of this autonomous exposure management approach. From there, we will, automatically remediate the information, and it will, fix these deviants.
Greg, this is really exciting. We've actually recently done tech talks on both new compliance features as well as criticality in the new, EPSS score and things like that. And you're basically taking these new things that we've talked about and showing us the story around them and how you can use it as a whole.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's those new features that comes as part of the products are definitely giving additional context and result to help you to prioritize and to act with confidence in your environment.
Greg, thank you so much for explaining that. Let's keep the story going. What's the next thing you have to show us?
Oh, I have a lot to present. So let's focus now specifically on the vulnerabilities. And there is two types of vulnerability I really would like to highlight based on the information, we see from benchmarks. The first one, if you're okay, it's to focus specifically on third-party applications. A lot of people know how to remediate, the operating system patch because they have some campaign in place. But, having a focus on these third-party applications is usually interesting because there is a lot of application running in your environment. So where do you start? If we consider, for example, as part of the product, Adobe solutions, this nice view is also providing all findings that on just 4 endpoints, we have a total of 2,500 vulnerabilities associated. We also have this endpoint criticality information that is listed that can really help also to prioritize the remediations as part of your future deployment. And what is interesting, you were speaking about the EPSS score. It is also, to get this information, to know how to prioritize and how some vulnerabilities associated to Adobe Reader can be really, problematic and needs to be fixed.
This view, just being able to do that drill down from absolutely everything, which can be intimidating, to what happens if I upgrade this specific product and what do I get to fix? That I feel like is so effective, and it gives me this insight so quickly of like, oh shoot, let's update Adobe. To your point, 2,500 findings. That's a good thing to be able to knock out with updating that suite of products. So love it.
What's also interesting here is, of course, this is the vulnerability operating center team that will mainly use this portion of the product, to leverage all the vulnerability that we have in place. But from the operation teams that will remediate these vulnerabilities, knowing, the priority, the criticality of the device, and all the vulnerability associated with an application can also help them to push and to prioritize, the remediations. So the operation team will mainly focus on deploy software. And from here, we will look specifically for Adobe product. And let's use only the latest versions. So here, what we have the latest version that is available. So, and also an additional information that we have in place is the confidence score. Confidence score is very useful for the operation teams. They know that if they push this application, we have 97% of the time the application was successfully installed without any issue. So they have a great confidence about how to deploy these applications. And from there, they can choose if they want to deploy automatically right now the solutions or to add to a bundle, for example, if there is, package of applications includes. And then, based on the deployment, using the standard maintenance windows and rings to, deploy these applications.
So essentially, you were able to find an issue, find a vulnerability, or find something that was vulnerable, and be able to remediate it with just a few clicks.
Absolutely. And that's really the purpose of this exposure management lifecycle. So the goal is really to get an accurate visibility upfront. What do we have in terms of device and in terms of application running in the environment? And then through all the process, it's either discovery, prioritizations, and validations, arrive to this mobilization step and to be sure you can remediate and also reduce what we call the MTTR, the mean time to remediate between when you find some vulnerabilities in your environments and when you actually fix it. So this time is as short as possible without getting some fatigue from the team.
This is, as Alex has been saying, just making it easy. As we've been saying, so delightful. I love seeing that start to finish workflow and seeing how easy it makes it for both teams that are working on fixing all this stuff. I know we have more. So talk to me, aside from being able to do our, third-party applications, remediate those, how else are we making this whole workflow more easy for our users?
Absolutely. Um, And that's really, what we try to achieve here, to make it easier and to really optimize, the life cycle. We can also do the same with the standard patch approach, from the operating system. It could be for Windows or for Linux. And we will have, a similar scenario. Okay, so now we will go back in findings and vulnerabilities, and we will focus mainly on the vulnerability associated with the operating systems. So we'll apply some filter specifically on the platforms. And I like to start by focusing on the high EPSS score. From this view, we have interesting information. And I like, for example, to start with specifically these CVEs. So these CVEs affect 23 different endpoints. It's a high severity with a score of 7.8, part of CISA and has an EPSS score of 0.85. So also to explain what is EPSS score. So EPSS is the likelihood of how a vulnerability could be exploited over the next 30 days. The score is between 0 and 1, so 0.85 is quite high. So there is a high percentage of risk that this vulnerability will be exploited soon.
And I loved seeing it all in the same space, both the number of endpoints, the criticality, the EPSS, everything you need to look at it and be like, I might not know otherwise how to pick between which one to address first. Well, I'm going to look at all of that and make the call.
Absolutely. And the flyout box giving, additional context as well. So we get back, all the score, the CVSS and the EPSS as we just described. We also have the exploit intelligence content. Here we have, for example, information about total exploit, which is 8 already identified. The max maturity is also very interesting. We know that this exploit has been weaponized and the code is already publicly available as well as commercially available. And below we have the different information about the exploit.
Goodness. I just have to pause here and say that I love this context so much because with that security background, like we know that you've got your attack surface and you have threats, and we then quantify that in what is the risk that this is exposed, and that risk is how vulnerable is the device itself, but how likely is it that someone attacks it, and having this data not just about the device, but about this right here. It's been weaponized. It's publicly available, that exploit code. That worries me more than just something that's severe, but we don't have any publicly available exploit.
Exactly. So all this context can really help you, to prioritize the remediations and what you should do. There is thousands of vulnerabilities in every environment. Why I should fix this one more than another? So having this context that, this one is weaponized is probably, helping to prioritize and having, the process to engage the operation teams behind. Additionally, what we have also here is interesting is the applicable patches sections. Applicable patches give you basically information when the first patch about this vulnerability was referenced. So we see that this one is started in December 2024. From there, we can get these CVEs and navigate inside the remediation part. And here, having a different view about these vulnerabilities. So I like to start from the actionable findings. And here, if we filter specifically on these CVEs, we can get some also contextual information about what is the latest patch available in my environment that can also fix it. So we see that these vulnerabilities, we have, the additional information that we had before about the check ID, the CVSS score, and EPSS information. But we specifically have the information about the patch titles. So we see that the latest cumulative updates from February this month is also fixing these vulnerabilities.
I love that we update that because it could be so easily confusing. Which one should I install? So having the right there, we give you the latest patches you can install. Just clears up confusion proactively, and it really gives that real-time kind of intelligence of here's what you do as of today.
Exactly. And usually, people are speaking two different language. From the vulnerability side, they will speak about CVEs. From the operations side, they will speak about KBs on Microsoft environments. And it's different name, but basically they have the same purpose. So we know what's wrong and we know what needs to be fixed. And here, if we consider like the latest patch from Microsoft that was published this month, what we found interesting is that on just two endpoints that we have in our environment, for the one for Server 2022, we can fix already more than 1,100 vulnerabilities, different CVEs, which make a total findings of almost 2,000 vulnerabilities. So we can fix this specific vulnerability that have a high score and have high EPSS details, and we know that is weaponized. But also these simple actions can also, fix 1,000 different other CVEs. So the impact to fixing this one can be very valuable. From there, we can have, the possibility directly to create a patch list where, for example, that could be valuable if you need to push like a sniper patching to fix a vulnerability right now, or to add directly to a specific patch list. And then the remediation, you will go through, all the autonomous ring that we have in place in the environment.
And Greg, as you're going through this, I love seeing it in demo, but what makes me even happier about this product, about Tanium as a whole, is we're looking at this in our space. We could pivot to a customer's environment with thousands or hundreds of thousands of devices, and they get this same level of insight. And everything here is like that criticality that you mentioned, that who does it affect? We're not seeing, well, who does this affect outside of my estate? We're getting that intelligence right inside my organization. How does it impact me to let me make those prioritized decisions? And then just like you said, that autonomous, once we do it, we set it and we say go. And Tanium takes care of that hard work of remediating it for us, installing those patches, telling us it's fixed, and we just give it a thumbs up.
Absolutely. And for me, what is really important here in this autonomous exposure management approach, it's breaking the silos. This is really a philosophy how you need to think, like you need to know your environment, you need to know what's running, where you have some risk, where you have some vulnerability, some exposure in place. And from there, discussing, having some prioritization in place with the operation teams that will remediate the actions. So we are, ready through a single platform, breaking the silos to fix, and to reduce the risk in the environment.
Greg, yeah, that's great. All the things you're talking about make me think of, times sure are different from even a few years ago, back when I was in the field more. I remember having a separate team for STIGs that would be doing research, a separate team for patching that would be in charge of making sure these patches got out to endpoints, but then even having another team that was focused on endpoint health and making sure computers weren't stuck, requiring a reboot for these patches to be installed. And it's crazy watching the industry change to this unified view. It's really truly fascinating, and it's the next logical step in security evolution, right? Breaking down those silos, as you said. Greg, thank you so much for joining us today. Jesh, as always, thank you for being an amazing co-host. And thank you, Tech Talkers, for joining us on this conversation regarding exposure management. And we hope to see you next time on Tanium Tech Talks.
Yay!